Hi, everyone. This is the acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to talk about a couple of transits that are perfecting this week. One is the Sun square to Uranus, which is actually maybe one of my favorite transits. It always seems to be something that I enjoy, but as I say that, I'm sure now this time it'll be like stressful somehow. So we'll talk about that, Sun and Uranus. Also, Mercury is about to get in with an opposition to Jupiter and Pluto, and then eventually Saturn. I'm going to do the Saturn one a little bit later because it's a little further down the line. Maybe next week I'll cover that one. So yeah, anyway, let's take a look. All right, so here's what we've got, and let me circle and show you. So here's the Sun, about 6 Leo. Here's Uranus at about 10 degrees of Taurus, and the two are making a square to one another. Oh, you know what? I forgot Mars, Jupiter as well. We'll be talking about that one too. And then you can see Mercury here is just separating from the square to Mars and now going straight into an opposition with Jupiter. And then a little bit more slowly than that, Mercury moves faster than Mars. Mars is also moving into a square with Jupiter and then eventually a square to Pluto. I'm going to spend time talking a little bit more about Mars's square to Jupiter, and then probably next week I'll talk more about Mars's square to Pluto. Today I'll talk a little bit about Mercury's opposition to Jupiter and Pluto, and then the Sun square to Uranus. So a bunch of different transits to talk about. Let's break them down one by one. By the way, let me say something just initially, which is that I tell my students this too, which is if you are interpreting these transits, resist the urge to try to create a grand narrative. You've got 3 transits perfecting sort of simultaneously. You feel, the tempting thing is to say, oh my God, here's what it all means. Put it all together. Typically when people do this, it ends up sounding really sort of cliches. A lot of cliches are generated, right? So for example, you might say, all of these transits are happening at once. You're going to go through a powerful transformation, something like that. Or the energy is just going to be so intense and wild or something like that. And these kinds of cliches don't really help. Instead, they, it sort of makes it feel like you're like 13 and at Six Flags or something. It's like, oh my God, like reality is just such a roller coaster. And what actually really helps us, because what we really are looking for is information that can be practically applied in order to help us stay centered and cognizant of what types of karmic fields or seasons we're walking through. So that's why it's important to sort of isolate them. And then sometimes you can see certain kinds of themes or patterns that will emerge as you're individually isolating aspects and interpreting them, and not interpreting them in just one way, but in multiple different ways. And then multiple different connective tissues may emerge that give you a more well-rounded synthesis and something that's going to be more specific again than just energy so intense or whatever. So okay, so first of all, let's talk about the Sun and Uranus, and let's watch. I'll just show you how it's going to perfect. So what you're seeing is the square from the Sun and Uranus by Sunday, August 2nd. So that's coming in, and I'll be talking about this in my monthly overview for August as well. But that's what's happening this week, right? So what is that transit all about? Well, Sun Uranus is really oftentimes, and this is why I love this transit so much, is one of those transits that can really speak to periods of discovery, periods of great insight and breakthrough. Some of my greatest epiphanies, aha moments, and moments of what feel like kind of like divine transmission, clarity. For me, when I get into a creative flow or the light bulb turns on upstairs and I feel like I'm in the zone, that's almost always for me Sun Uranus dynamics. Like I can trace back so many times like that. Not only that, but recently as a Cancer Sun, when Uranus was in Aries and it squared my Sun, it was like that for like a year and a half or something. So yeah, I feel like the experience that I see with my clients too, just kind of reflecting on it over time, is that when Uranus transits your Sun in your natal chart, there's often a period of time where the sense of action or the plot line in your life is changing dramatically, as there's this feeling of awakening and inspiration and breakthrough. Now, sometimes the breakthroughs come with this aura of hubris or arrogance, or kind of that divine rebellious quality. For example, you know, there's sometimes like when there's progress in the air, like you're making a lot of progress on a project or something like that, or in my case, like we're getting ready to move, and we're sort of making progress and starting to pack things up or whatever. You get into that zone, right? And then suddenly you come up with some just completely blockheaded Herculean idea, like, well, let's just pack up the car and put it in a box, and we could just something is I don't know who would ever do that, but but if you can come up with this, like, just a kind of a just kind of a dumb idea, and it'll seem like the best idea, but actually you could sort of break your back doing it. So that kind of Herculean, there are no limits whatsoever, and I can do anything I want. Also, when progress becomes hubris, in anyone and anything, sometimes there's that, the battle cry for social progress or social change or institutional or organizational change at a job you work in or something like that. And someone will just go just like a little too far, in the midst of an organization or institution wanting to change. Someone will, I don't know what they'll come to work like in some crazy costume with a big banner all over them, and it's like, dude, Darren, you didn't need to you didn't need to dress up like the Statue of Liberty, because it turns out that everyone's on the same page. We're all trying to make change right now. Like these crazy pictures that pop into my head. Anyway, yeah, so be careful that you're not that person where it's like, yeah, change is coming, change is on the way, but you don't have to try to develop an ego platform based on the change you're trying to create. You don't have to, I don't know, just where it can almost turn into kind of a militant self-righteousness is what I'm getting at. And I'm trying to think of it in the funniest way possible, but the ideas in my head probably don't tickle you like they tickle me. All right, so that's a Sun-Uranus dynamic that is coming through between now and the end of the week. And progressively, as this comes along, where there were self-limiting beliefs or ideas, you may also suddenly have an epiphany and go like, oh, I'm not actually limited by that, or I've been limiting by myself by something that's not actually necessary. So I think there's a lot of room for growth this week in surprising and innovative ways. There can also be themes of revolution or of emancipation, freedom, awakening, the need to break free, the desire to individuate, the desire to express more of ourselves personally or individually. You have to be careful that it's not too defiant or reckless again, or that it's not like care more about the change than about the way the change makes you look. Right? That's one of the big things for Sun-Uranus. Okay, so that's a few things about Sun-Uranus. Now let's get into Mercury and Jupiter. Now, Mercury, Jupiter is going to perfect a little bit earlier in the week. You've got about Thursday, July 30th, that it's going to perfect. And then by Saturday, it moves through the opposition to Pluto. So Thursday to Saturday, you've got a Jupiter, Mercury opposite Jupiter, and then Pluto. Now, what I like about this is that, oppositions are like dialecticals. There are going to be two extremes that are rising within us, probably mentally, intellectually, in the communication dynamics of our relationships or within our families. And these conversations may involve differing ideas or beliefs about the way that things should be done, about our religious or political affiliations, or something else. And these tensions are going to mount, between Thursday and Saturday, let's say, late part of the week through the weekend. And they have the potential to be somewhat volatile and somewhat divisive, especially around, like, Jupiter and Pluto in Capricorn may have very strong, somewhat rigid, traditionalist or fear-based beliefs, for example, or ways of thinking about things. And Mercury in Cancer is like, look, I just want to hang out and have some fun. And Jupiter and Pluto want to have a real heavy, intense, serious conversation about something they think you ought to believe. And you're like, well, I'd rather just keep the peace today. So that dialectical between Mercury, Jupiter, and Pluto probably has something to do with differing ideas or beliefs and communication about them rising to the surface. And there's no need to, like, let's say, push an agenda as much as Jupiter and Pluto might make you think that you need to. At the same time, there's no need to hide from anything either. So somewhere between hiding from something and like forcing yourself to have some big slugfest about differing ideas or beliefs, I think we learn to hold the tension of opposites like this, and we walk right through the middle, so to speak. And in the middle, we say, "That's interesting. I'll have to take that into consideration." This is something that a friend of the family who has been in Alcoholics Anonymous for a long time said that one of the communication tactics that they teach in 12-step programs is when someone has an agenda and they're really pushing it on you, to just say, "That's really interesting. I'll have to take that into consideration," or you kind of just say, like, "I'll think about that. Thanks." You can consider what someone is saying, even when someone is being pushy or aggressive. And it's really hard for them to keep going when you just acknowledge what they're saying and say, "Yeah, I'll think about that. I'll have to spend some time with that." It can kind of diffuse the need to try to hash something out right in the moment. On the other hand, Mercury opposite Jupiter can be about the expansion of our mind, and the transformation of long-held beliefs or ideas because of a challenging someone or something that challenges the status quo in our own minds. So ideas that come in to challenge and change us for the better, that we shouldn't necessarily run or hide from either, or a difficult conversation that we can't necessarily hide from. Now, this is, of course, amplified by the fact that at the same time, Mars is square to Jupiter and is square to Pluto coming up. And that is going to come, let's see, here we go. So it moves through the square with Jupiter by next Tuesday, August 4th. This is going to be in my month ahead forecast as well. And then gets into the square with Pluto, not for a while, right? Not until like August 13th. But Mars is also pressing some buttons here about beliefs, about strength, about what it means to be strong, about transformation, in the kind of transformation that is created through the will, through force, through muscles, through strength, and militarism, as well as missions, crusades, and visions that need some form of more aggressive or assertive action in order to be accomplished. Mars is going to be getting us into a conversation with those qualities in August. So that's coming behind all of this. I would say this is like the conversation between two generals on the battlefield before the Mercury opposition to Jupiter and Pluto is a bit like a pre-war dialogue. Are we going to go to battle, or are we working something out? Are we going to cooperate on some kind of cause that unites all of us, or are we going to let our differences really drive a wedge between us? And because following after this Mercury opposition to Jupiter and Pluto is the Mars square, and that Mars square is about decisive action, executive choices. It's big. It has bravado behind it with Mars Jupiter. It's transformative. It's heavy. It might be a little explosive. It's also to a certain extent with the coming square to Saturn in the mix, that Mars will be moving into a square with Saturn. It has the sense of what is the mature best use of my energies and actions for practical results that are sober and again more sort of mature. So Mercury is starting that as this kind of conversation, which I think is really interesting. So it's also interesting to me that if we look at how this is happening, this is also happening as the moon is going to be activating, like over the July 31st to say August 2nd, the moon will be in Capricorn, really emphasizing that Capricorn stellium in opposition to Mercury in Cancer. Now, the other thing is with Mercury in Cancer, the question on the other end is, can't we do all of this while really paying attention to the heart and soul, while showing devotion, while being emotionally nurturing to one another? The Cancerian side of things is also holding the importance of the the vulnerable space in all of this, the more childlike or fragile place that exists, whether that's home, family, peace within an environment. And Mercury in Cancer is generally looking for a feeling of unity or of security emotionally within whatever environment that it's in. And it's a messenger on behalf of the lunar side of things. Well, that opposition that's coming is also about how do we deal with differences in a way that doesn't create this feeling of alienation or complete, separation from one another's perspectives. So it's quite an interesting transit that's coming up. My advice would be, honestly, my simplest piece of advice is to be a listener. Listen to what the universe is saying. Listen to what the planets are saying. Listen to what your the inner spirit, the indwelling spirit is saying. Listen to what the people around you are saying. Be careful about trying to force an agenda. Be the listener, and I think that the transformation that is on the way will be pretty profound. The more that we are trying to force something or avoid something, either like retreat in fear or move forward with aggression because of on behalf of ideas that we feel really emotionally triggered by, the more that this transit will probably entangle us in conflict. The more that we listen and hold space for our own mind, for our own heart, and for what the world around us is saying, or what kinds of dynamic tensions are appearing in the world around us, the more easy it will be to receive that insight. Remember, during all of this, the sun is square to Uranus. There can be real breakthroughs and sort of aha moments that come alongside of this Mercury-Jupiter opposition. In fact, the sun squared Uranus comes through on Sunday, which is right after all of this happens. So I think, for me, when I see these kinds of things coming, I just write myself a note, make sure I'm doing my chanting. That's my daily meditation. Make sure I'm exercising, getting enough sleep. Make sure that I'm, I've got a clear mind, and that I'm remembering today is a day to listen. And the more that I can do that and try to respond sensitively and carefully to what's coming up, the more that these transits tend to really deliver life-changing insights. And that's that pivot to the Sun Uranus square by the end of the week. So that's what I've got for you today. Just a few reflections. I am doing this rather quickly because I'm also preparing my August overview, my August horoscope. So look for that soon, and a few other cool things I've got for you guys this week. All right, take it easy, everyone. Bye.